Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the CyberGizmo, I have a very serious topic to talk about today, which is the changes that are coming for CentOS Linux. So I want to talk about that right after this. December the 8th, a day that will, no, I'm just kidding. So December the 8th, the CentOS governing board announced in their blog that they were going to shift focus away from CentOS Linux to spend more time working on CentOS Streams. And so their focus now will shift over to Streams instead of CentOS Linux. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Maybe there's been a lot of people talking about this. There's been a lot of blog posts. I'll bet there'll be a lot of videos about it. There aren't so far, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this pick up speed very quickly here in the next couple of days. But I wanted to lay down the facts first. So I'm going to step back. I'm not going to editorialize anything. I'm just going to give you the facts first. So CentOS was originated as a build of CentOS Linux, which was a RHEL derivation. That was back in 2004. And then 2 years later, in 2006, another derivation of Red Hat Linux called Tau Linux decided to fold up. They weren't going anywhere. They couldn't get enough people to help work on stuff, and the guy wanted to just retire and get out of it. So they rolled their code base into CentOS Linux, which then became CentOS. So, in between that time frame, I don't have this on here. It was the Red Hat's reaction. CentOS their goal was to produce a line for line, code for code, feature to feature compatible release with RHEL. Now, Red Hat could have gotten mad about it. They could have gotten really angry about it, and they didn't. Instead, Red Hat would help them and get stuff ready for them. They were kind of for it. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll give you stuff and we'll help you and tell you how things work. And they kind of stepped up and did that. So it was kind of an interesting reaction to it. In 2014, Red Hat announced that it would sponsor the CentOS project. And at the time, they said that well, we'll get to the announcement. There's an actual press release that goes along with that, and I want to show you that in a minute. But then in September of last year, CentOS governing board announced that they were going to introduce this thing called CentOS Streams. And CentOS Streams was designed as a means to have an impact on what happens with Red Hat Linux, Enterprise Linux. So it was allowing the community to have a place to contribute code, to work on stuff that would make its way into RHEL. Most of it, before that, it was coming from Fedora, plus there is a Red Hat Red Hat Enterprise Linux team that does just Red Hat Enterprise Linux development. So, and they're kind of off on their own. The CentOS team is different. So the team that does CentOS Linux is a different part of Red Hat. It is, I forget the name of the organization, but maybe I'll remember it during the course of this. But yeah, there's a group that's separate from RHEL. And then in November the 2020th, we all know that CentOS 6 went end of life. So all those people that were working on stuff had to migrate, and most of them, I think, migrated to CentOS 8. So timing is everything, right? And then this bomb drops on December the 8th that the CentOS governing board announced that the CentOS community will be shifting focus away from CentOS Linux. And oh, by the way, if you're on CentOS Linux 8, you have until the end of December 2021 to get off, because we're no longer going to be supporting the operating system at that point. So that's where we are. But I want to look at the press release from 2014 first. What was Red Hat's focus? Now, this was before IBM bought them. So they announced that the CentOS project, they're joining forces to build a new CentOS capable of driving forward development and adoption of next-generation open source technology. So you notice they're saying they're going to build a new CentOS. So, yeah, that was definitely in the plan from the time that they brought them into the Red Hat fold. Then on September 2019, this is from the CentOS Governing Board, they announced that as they had joined forces back in 2014, and that was their goal, was to develop a new CentOS. CentOS Stream is exactly that, and they called it a rolling release. Probably, we'll talk about that. It's probably a very unfortunate use of those two words, but and that Fedora Linux would be the downstream development for Red Hat Linux, but CentOS would serve as the intermediary between Fedora and RHEL. And that would allow you a couple of places to get involved and work on stuff. If you were interested in bleeding edge, latest technology, playground, go to Fedora. If you wanted to impact what was going on with RHEL, go to CentOS Streams. So that's kind of what was going on there. And they thought that paired up nicely with the path that was going on. So I drew out the development cycle. So from 2014 to 2019, it was fairly simple. Fedora went to RHEL, and then 1 to 2 months later, CentOS would push out a variant of, a version of Linux based on what they received from the RHEL code base. So everything was hunky-dory and it looked pretty smooth. Now, there were changes that went back upstream from Red Hat to Fedora. They do move back and forth. But I don't think there was anything that went back up and from CentOS. Now, maybe there is. But I don't know. Maybe there is. I just don't know. 2019 to 2021, you had this. Fedora pushed its changes to CentOS Streams. Those, in turn, went to Red Hat. And then 1 to 2 months later, Red Hat would, again, their baseline would be picked up by the CentOS team, and it would be merged and created that particular version in CentOS Linux. And once again, you had this Frankenstein architecture to move changes back to Fedora. And I think there was also a line that went to CentOS as well, but I know there was still some direct action that went back to Fedora from RHEL as well. So that had to be just one big train. That has to be a train wreck. It just has to be. I can't, from an architectural perspective, that is not desirable. That's not a desirable state. Sorry, I editorialized now. I said I wasn't going to, but it's kind of hard not to. The development cycle, what does it look like for 2022 and beyond? So Fedora will send its changes to CentOS Streams. CentOS Streams sends it to RHEL, and then they come back up. They feed back any patches or anything back up the chain. So that's what the plan is. That makes more sense. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. So did we lose a free Red Hat Enterprise Linux? Because that's what CentOS was being used for. It was a free version of RHEL. So at the time I'm making this video, the only thing that is free from Red Hat right now is if you're a developer, you can go onto the site, register as a developer, and you can receive one entitlement only, of Red Hat, and it's their full suite. So you get Workstation, you get Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So you can do with that what you will, but you can't run it in production. You can test on it, you can use it in your home labs to do development on, whatever you need to do, but you cannot use that in production. There's not a license that you can use. There is no support, so you don't have a phone number you can call for support. As I understand it, and listening to some of now there was a bunch of discussion today between the Red Hat people and the CentOS people and a lot of other people like us that were kind of yelling and screaming. I wasn't yelling and screaming. I don't do that. This is change. This is engineering. Engineering is always about change. You just get over it. That's what happens in this world is there's change. But they're supposed to. Red Hat is supposed to be working on some kind of free entitlement for Red Hat Enterprise Linux. They realize that they've left a hole, and they know that. And so I don't know what it looks like. It's not released yet. They should have done this first. If they had, they probably would have avoided a whole lot of backflash that happened. but they're supposed to release a free version of RHEL. I don't know if it's for production. I have no idea. It's not out yet. They haven't announced it. But I would think that that's something they've taken into account, that they've left this hole in their architecture, and they need to plug it up with something. So anyway, I don't know what it's going to be. We'll have to wait and see. I think they did it backwards. They should have done this first, but us engineers aren't the best PR people, so I'll admit that. So this is where you need PR and marketing to get involved, and not engineering. Engineering is just really bad at this. But didn't you say that CentOS Streams was a rolling release? Didn't their announcements say that? Yeah, it did. Unfortunately, that's not really the case. If you go and download CentOS Streams right now, you'll find it has a 4.19 kernel in it. That's not a rolling release. A rolling release would probably have 5.9, maybe even 5.10 now in it, but and you would have the latest packages that you could possibly find. It'd be the Arch. Arch is a rolling release. But CentOS is really more, CentOS Streams is more meant for continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD. There, as I understand it from listening to the guys today, I hope I got this right, but CentOS Streams will not have point releases in it. That's what they mean by a CI/CD. But when they get to the end of the life on CentOS Streams 8, there will be a CentOS Streams 9. So, yeah. So, anyway, there are point releases in Red Hat. I think they plan on continuing to do that. At least that's what I picked up today. Again, it could be wrong. If I am, let me know. There was a lot of shouting and just a lot of noise in the middle of this, and it's really hard to try to figure out what these guys are trying to tell them when people keep interrupting them and being mad about stuff. So the RHEL point releases will be derived from the available CentOS streams, as I understand it. So they'll pick a point in time, and Red Hat will say, okay, give me your stuff. They'll create a point release out of that, and that will go into RHEL. But CentOS Streams continues on its merry way of developing and building new code base up and just continuing on down the line. RHEL and CentOS Linux, now we're talking about Linux side of things here, not Streams, have glacial release cycles. I mean, they're like Debian. I mean, they're all about stability. They're all about, let's not change everything in the organization all at once. Let's make sure that we plan things, we have time to do things, and we're slow about it. That was fine when software was developed on a waterfall model, when you had development and you moved to integration. When you moved to integration, then you moved to testing, and then you moved to system testing, and then you moved to packaging and deployment. That was waterfall. That was fine in those days, but that model doesn't work today. That dog don't hunt, as we say. And it's a pretty high jump from Fedora to a baseline RHEL because of this lag time that happens. I mean, let's say that Fedora and RHEL start out even like this, and then over time RHEL is going that way, right? And this distance between Fedora's development and RHEL is getting wider and wider. So you got more and more packages that are being built here, and a lot of changes that are building up. It has to be a nightmare to try to manage that into RHEL. The other thing is that the release cycles for the releases themselves, for the point releases, I think 2 years. Point releases are 2 years, 5 years for major releases, like going from 6 to 7, 7 to 8. And then there's a 10-year support window for RHEL right now. That's great, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't work in today's CI/CD model. One of the changes I've heard is that the lifespan will be shortened to 5 years. And again, it was really hard to try to get this stuff out because people just kept interrupting and they wouldn't stop typing, and it was just text that was flying by. But so as I understand it, they're going to shorten things to 5 years on the lifespan, and then there will be more frequent interval. And I couldn't make it out what it was. I think it was 1 to 2 years, but I don't know. I couldn't make it out. But there'll be a shorter release. There'll be a major release, and then minor releases will come more frequently, and then the overall life of that particular system will only be 5 years. That's it. So these poor guys. I'm not laughing about this. This is not funny. But the CentOS 6 guys just finished the migration, and I think most of them went to 8 rather than go to 7 and then get to repeat it within, 2024, something like that. They would have to repeat it. So a lot of them jumped to CentOS 8 because they had a 10-year window from 2019. So, yeah. Timing is everything, right? When you make an announcement. And if you put it near when there was an end of life and you've got all these people that had just moved over to your release, and then you tell them, oh, by the way, you have a year to live, I imagine a lot of those guys are probably not real happy right now. And I know a lot of them were vocalizing that. And really, that was a poor choice of date. Anyway, yeah, that date is definitely a poor choice. So, what's my personal take on all this? You've heard some of it already, but when CentOS Streams was announced, I was excited because for once you could get involved, and the Red Hat team would then be exposed to the public. They're out here with us, and we're working with them. So together we're building RHEL. You didn't have that chance before. You didn't have any input into it before. They did it all. The only input you had was if you got into Fedora and hoped that they took one of your changes and moved it forward. But CentOS moves you closer to the source, right? And it gets you involved with the team that's going to deploy. The development cycle with CentOS and Streams to RHEL, it never made any sense to me. From the standpoint of going from Fedora to Streams to RHEL to CentOS Linux. It's like, huh? Did you just do that? Did you just do the port from Fedora to CentOS Streams and now you're doing it again? That just never made much sense to me. And then how they try to manage all the patches and where they find bugs and get it back upstream or downstream to the other releases that are in the way, like Fedora. And anyway, that's a mess. So, but the whole purpose of CI/CD is to do code a little, test a little, deploy a little, code a little, test a little, deploy a little. It's meant to be continuous, a chain of stuff that's going on. A lot of organizations' development cycles have moved that direction today. I can only think of a couple that still haven't, and they belong in the government, and they're like, yeah, never mind. I think the drop dead date for CentOS 8 is a little aggressive. I think they should reconsider and maybe make it, instead of 2021, there is a date that is in one of the planning guides for RHEL, which is I think they call it the end of full support date. Now there's also an end of life date, which is further out, but this one is when they stop full support on CentOS 8. Why don't you use that date, May 2024, as the date you currently have in your calendar as planned? That would make more sense. I mean, at least you can get some of the anger taken care of and give these guys enough time to kind of regroup a little bit and decide what they want to do. Because right now, I'm sure a lot of them are just plain angry, and they're angry because they just finished it. You didn't tell them anything until they were done. That's not fair. That's not nice. So I heard a lot of this today. I'm going to move over to Oracle Linux. Really? Seriously? You're going to move over to Oracle Linux? Okay, so let me tell you about Oracle. So anything you download from Oracle, you have to have a login to do that. And they will, most of their stuff, with the exception of Oracle Linux, is for non-production use. Now, Oracle Linux is free. It is I would be polite to say it was a derived version of RHEL. It isn't. It's a mutation of RHEL. And I think as soon as Ellison sees that, you got all these people coming in and looking at it, the dollar signs are going to go off in his head, and he's going to go, I can make money. I can pay for my island, so I just charge you for it. So I think that's what will happen, and I think it'll be the end of. I think that'll end Oracle Linux being free so quick. Yeah. Anyway, enough about that. That's no Oracle Linux. No, I wouldn't go there. You can if you want, but I wouldn't go there. How about moving to Debian or Ubuntu? That's certainly viable. Although I think you'll find it'll take you some time. I'm not trying to talk you out of it, but just look at it from this standpoint. The packages are different. The way packages are built up are different. Some of them have different names. Some of them have similar names. The dependencies are definitely different between them. Some of the versions are different that you can get a hold of. So, yeah, you can get there, but it might take you some work to do it. Probably more work than going to Streams. What about BSD? That's a great Unix-like distro, but it's not Linux. So, yeah, you're gonna if you're trying to bring over server hardware that's new, you're probably going to find BSD is going to have a struggle with that. Because they get their drivers from Linux, so you're downstream from the Linux kernel teams. That's crazy talk. We went there already. We came up from Unix to Linux, and now we're going to revert back. I guess you can do that if you want. I'm not going to. I'm not going to do that. BSD has its place. It is a great security OS. It is a great ZFS machine. It has its place in the infrastructure for server farms. Would I want to run containers on it? Docker doesn't even run on it, guys. I mean, good luck with getting that to work. So yeah. And then my favorite, when IBM planned all this. Well, if you knew anything about IBM, you know that word planned would have been in there. So, I'm just kidding. Don't get mad at me, IBMers. Well, you can get mad at me if you want. But I don't think so, because if you look at the statements that were made in 2014 and again in 2019, 2014 was way ahead of the IBM takeover of Red Hat, or acquisition, I should say. And they already had planned that CentOS was definitely a part and parcel to their development plans for RHEL. So I think it was pretty clear in 2014, and I think 2019 RHEL really laid out how they were going to accomplish this. So maybe we were all asleep, but I mean, we thought that at least CentOS would go on until maybe CentOS 9 came out, but. There, as I understand it from listening to the guys on one of the podcasts today, there's only 2 guys that I guess work on the transition team that work on CentOS Linux. There's only 2 people that are actually doing that work. So kudos to you guys for doing that. But it seems like that's got to be a lot of work for you folks. So what am I going to do? I do have CentOS 8. I am moving it to CentOS 8 Streams, period. I'm going to do it. I'm going to move over there. I just personally, I do have some Debian and I do have some Ubuntu servers, but those are ARM-based. I run my x86 machines. I do have a couple that are CentOS. There are a couple of things that I love about CentOS and I love about RHEL. And one of them is OSCAP. Go read about it. It is a great tool to actually secure your system. Linus is a great tool as well, but it isn't as comprehensive as OSCAP is. So, final thoughts. This is an architectural view, so I'm going to put my architect's hat on now. There are a few people that like change in this world, and there are even fewer people in the Linux world that like change. There are even fewer that like failure. I think that if Red Hat and CentOS, they work together, I think that if they hadn't made this move, I seriously think Red Hat would be in jeopardy because their operating system is designed for a different era. I said that. It's designed for the waterfall model. And that is not the right operating system that we need for CI/CD. They know that. These guys aren't dumb. They know that. I think they would have faded into history if they hadn't done this. And I applaud them for waking up and going, yeah, we got a problem. We need to move and do something about this. And I think the second thing here is they really need the involvement of the community in order to help, because if you inbreed all your ideas from inside an organization, then you end up thinking like everyone else, and it just becomes a committee speak. Committee designs are usually pretty poor. At best, they're very poor. And you end up trying to please those that have loud objections to things, but there are no rhyme and reason for doing it. So they really need the input from the outside. Get some fresh ideas, fresh air. look at. There's lots of people that know. I mean, I see them on my channel all the time. That you guys will come in and you'll tell me something. I'll go, really? I have never heard of that before. And that's the way things are today. It's moving so fast. Not any one of us can keep up with it all. So you need input from the outside. So yeah, the traditional way of thinking about servers and services and applications and hardware, and I mean there are even software packages now that can borrow pieces virtually out of any machine that's in the infrastructure and assemble a virtual machine out of it. Not a VM, not a typical VM, but I mean it looks like real hardware. So yeah, I mean that's the game we're playing. Red Hat doesn't work in that. It needs to evolve. It needs to change. So I think there's really 3 more questions I have. And this is for the Red Hat team, and I hope that maybe they'll see this in passing, maybe they won't, but I hope somebody does. And I would love to talk to one of you guys and get you on and do an interview with you. But here's my 3 questions. You can have these in advance. So Fedora Silverblue, where does it fit in this architecture? I've heard when it was initially done that this was a possible replacement for Fedora. Is it? Is that in your plan? Is it in your roadmap? CoreOS. CoreOS is for containerization. It is I hate that word, hyper-converged, but it is meant for fast-paced, bring it up quick type of operating systems that are defined and they're repeatable. So I can just churn out hundreds of them all at once. Bang, just build up a huge infrastructure all at once. It's a cookie cutter. How does that fit in? And then finally, there's a concept that's under RHEL that was called the application streams, stream updates, I think it was. It's a hand-picked select set of packages that are allowed to change versions during the life of a version, a major and a minor version of RHEL. Generally, they're compilers. Python is one of them. Is that obsoleted by design now? Since you can pull at will, right? Anytime you wanted to from the CentOS Streams. So the last 2 pieces I have an appeal to you that watch this channel. They need you. The community needs you. And whether you choose to go work for Debian or work on Ubuntu or you work on Arch, doesn't matter. The community needs us to get involved, even if it's just doing documentation and testing, or whether it's actually getting in and writing code and making changes and helping them out that way. There are some people that do designs in some of the bigger organizations, but the little organizations probably on 1 or 2 people to do those designs, and they probably need help as well. Get involved. Don't get mad. If you don't like the way things are being done, get involved with it. Get your opinion in at the baseline, not reacting to it afterwards. That's the part I have to say for you today. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Like I said, my plan is to stick around with CentOS Streams. There's just some things about it I really like, and that I don't see in the other Linux distributions. They don't have fully qualified OSCAP. They don't. And by that I mean you actually have support from the policymakers that are actually approving whether or not that particular server gets to switch on or not. So, yeah, and you don't have that in the others. So, anyway, that's all I had for today. Hope you enjoyed this. And as always, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. And if you're angry about it, yeah, it's fine. You can say you're angry about it. I can imagine that there's some people that are angry about it, and justifiably so. But I don't think this was handled in the best way. Other than that, see you next time. Bye for now.